I probably should not admit this, especially with the publisher of the magazine in the room, but I'm going to tell you that as the editor of our state magazine, I actually do not have one shred of formal journalism training. Nothing like that. Not one tiny little shred. I have never taken a copy editing class. I have never taken any kind of editing class. I know I should not tell you that. But what I have is an English degree. I have an English literature degree. And when I went to college, that's what I got. And I loved it. I was eat up with it, really, as they say, down here in the South. Eat up with literature and everything that meant. And I just embraced it. And I read the writers that I know you all probably read too. I read Cheever and, Updike and Richard Yates. And those were the writers that I thought if you had an English degree and you were a consumer of great pieces of art, that's who you read, and that's what you wanted, and that's what you got a hold of, were people like that. Well, that was wonderful, and I loved all those writers and still do. And then in about 1990, something happened to me that really sort of changed my life. I was a student at UNCG, getting this fine English literature degree, and I had come out of one of my classes where I'm sure we'd spent 2 hours in there dissecting Revolutionary Road or whatever. And I'm walking down the hall, and one of my classmates and friends who's kind of leaned against the concrete block wall, he calls me over. He says, "Elizabeth, come over here. I've got something." I said, "Okay." So I walk over to my friend, and he drops his backpack off his shoulder, and he opens it up, and he says, "I've got something that I want to give to you." I said, "Oh, okay." And so he reaches into his bag, and he pulls out this thing, this tome, you really could call it. It's this book. It's this 800-page book. Heavy. It's bound to weigh 5 pounds. And he says, "I want to give this to you, and I want you to take it home, and I want you to read it." And I said, "Okay, I will." And so I take this big, heavy, 800-page, 40-pound book and put it in my backpack, and I take it home. And I go home, and I read this book. And I read in the first page about this woman named Lucy, who's telling me the story of her life. She's 99 years old, and she's telling this story from the bed of a retirement home, a nursing home where she lives. And I read this, and I read it in about a week, and I am blown away by what I'm reading. And this is not Cheever, and this is not Updike, and this is not Richard Yates, and this is not Tim O'Brien. This is something different, because this woman named Lucy, who's telling me this story of her life over the course of 100 years, sounds like me. And she's writing or talking from this place that I know. And I read this book, and I think, what is this? And I finish it, and it's from this writer that I had never heard of, whose name was Allen Gurganus. And the name of this book was The Oldest Living Confederate Widow Tells All. And I read this book, and I think, what in the world? And I realize that this book was written where I live, in North Carolina. And all of a sudden, I realized that the greatest writers in the world are not living in New England, and they're not living in Mississippi, which up until that point is where I thought all the greatest writers in the world were. They are living where I live. They're in my backyard. They're in North Carolina. And so I went back, and I go to the library, and I start looking for all these other North Carolina writers, and I find this woman named Jill McCorkle, and she wrote this book called The Cheerleader, and then she wrote this other book at the same time called July 7th, and I devoured both of those. And then I find this writer named Clyde Edgerton, and he wrote a book called Rainy, and I read that, and it's amazing and it's extraordinary. And then I find this book that comes out the next year, and it's called Hello Down There, and it's written by this writer named Michael Parker, and this is the man whose class I'm sitting in. So around these writers, consumed by these writers, surrounded by these writers, and it is extraordinary and it is amazing. And like I say, for the first time ever in my life, I realized that writing happens here. Amazing writing happens here. And so that's what I became, was this reader, not just of Cheever and of Updike and of Eudora Welty, but of the people who sounded like me and who wrote about the place where I was from too. It was wonderful. So many years later, I get lucky enough to have this extraordinary job. I've been at our state for 15 years, and I will tell you, Bernie knows this, our publisher, for 15 years it has been this dream to introduce fiction into the pages of our magazine. Next year we will celebrate our 80th anniversary. We were started in 1933, and I am so proud that going into our 80th anniversary, our December issue, which you all hopefully will take a copy of, introduces 7 of what I think are some of the greatest writers in this state. I asked 7 of these writers if they would be in any way interested in contributing an original, never before published, completely, just nobody had ever seen it before, story just for us. And I thought if one person says yes, I probably will just fall into the floor and cry. And all 7 writers said okay, and they did, and I cannot believe it. And I was so just thrilled and proud when one of my favorite writers ever, Alan Gerganis, agreed to be the lead writer for the story, for the whole fiction issue, 50 pages of fiction that we've devoted to this issue that I hope you all will read and enjoy, leave on your coffee table, come back to it again and again. We are so proud to do this. It's probably one of the best issues I've ever worked on, and I appreciate so much you all being a part of it and kind of seeing with us the first pages as we open it up.